There are shows that get canceled, there are shows that get forgotten, and then there's The Drew Carey Show. This 233 episode juggernaut ran for 9 seasons and was one of ABC's biggest hits of the 90s. It was bold and it was revolutionary, and it had one of the ugliest, messiest endings of any successful show from that era. We're talking about a network blunder that caused a slow motion disaster that unfolded over 3 seasons and left everyone involved embarrassed. And then an unforeseen snag that erased the show from existence for nearly 2 decades. This is the rise, the ugly fall, and the bizarre disappearing act of The Drew Carey Show. Before we start, give this video a like if you watched The Drew Carey Show back in the day, as I did, and subscribe for more retro TV deep dives. Let's go all the way back to 1991 and a young comic at a make or break point in his career. Drew Carey didn't come from much. He'd grown up in Cleveland's old Brooklyn neighborhood, lost his father when he was 8, and ultimately joined the Marine Corps. In 1985, while still in the Marines, a disc jockey friend named David Lawrence paid Carey to write jokes for his radio show. He told him, "If you want to get better, go to the library and check out books on how to write jokes." That's what got the comedy ball rolling for Drew. The following year, he won an open mic contest and became MC at the Cleveland Comedy Club. He spent the next few years grinding through clubs in Cleveland and Los Angeles, getting his first national exposure on Star Search in 1988. And a few years later, in debt and needing something big to happen, he finally got his shot. Carson. In November 1991, Drew Carey walked onto The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, and he killed to the point where Carson invited him onto the couch, which for a comic was everything. It was the ultimate career-changing endorsement. Previously, Carson had launched the careers of Letterman, Seinfeld, Gary Shandling, Ellen DeGeneres, and Roseanne, and now, nearing the end of Carson's era, it was Drew's turn. Drew knew exactly what had just happened. He described it as floating out of his body. By the end of that week, his management office had done nothing but answer calls about Drew. And by the end of the year, he had a development deal with Disney. Then they voided it. During a taping, just a few scenes to give executives a feel for the show's tone, a producer asked Carey to make a change. He dropped an F-bomb under his breath, and that afternoon, he was fired. But he used that Disney money to pay off his debts and continued on. After a few bit parts, in 1994, he got cast in an NBC sitcom called The Good Life, playing, not coincidentally, a hapless middle-class bachelor who can't quite catch a break. And it was canceled almost immediately after it debuted. But one of the people connected to that show was a writer-producer named Bruce Helford. When The Good Life folded, Helford invited Carey to join the writing staff of his next project, a sitcom called Someone Like Me. And that experience was somehow even worse. Helford got fired after the 4th episode. The writer's room was so stressed and so miserable that Carey started sprinkling Tums over the pizza he ordered for the table just to make people laugh. Someone Like Me was canceled in April 1994, a month after it debuted. But before Carey walked out the door, a couple of writers pulled him aside and told him something that stuck. He should have a show of his own. He went home and sat with that. Now that I knew a little bit about writing, I thought, what kind of show could I have? What would I be? How would I have ended up if I didn't become a stand-up comic? That question was the whole show. He called Helford, the same guy who'd just been fired alongside him. They refined the concept together, then took it to Warner Brothers and ABC. And it was far from a slam dunk. They pitched it as the anti-Seinfeld. Where Seinfeld was wealthy, narcissistic New Yorkers with minor problems, Drew's show would be a working-class guy in Cleveland with lovable losers. Drew wasn't a yuppie, he was an everyman, stuck in middle management who showed up anyway. Every show is like, oh, it's New York yuppies that have minor problems, Carey said on ABC's Primetime Live. This show is about one guy, dumpy white guy who lives in Cleveland. They said yes, barely, according to Carey, and now they needed to cast their lovable losers. Ryan Stiles, already known from the British version of Whose Line Is It Anyway, was cast as Lewis. Diedrich Bader was cast as Oswald. He got the role because Drew had seen Bader in The Beverly Hillbillies and liked him so much that he cast him. For Kate, Drew's tomboyish childhood friend and on-again, off-again love interest, they cast Christa Miller. The most important piece of casting almost didn't happen at all. I'll get to that in a moment. The Drew Carey Show premiered September 13th, 1995 on a Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. The pilot dropped viewers right into Drew's world. The soul-crushing daily grind at Winford Louder, the friends gathering at the Warsaw Tavern, and the sense that this guy's life was permanently stuck in neutral. But the most important part of the pilot was a character who appeared in exactly one scene, Mimi Bobeck. Mimi, played by Kathy Kinney, was the loud, blue eyeshadow-wearing office nemesis. She was just supposed to be in one scene where she threatened to sue the store because she was turned down for a job because of her makeup. But she was so good and the public reaction was so positive, the producers continued the storyline, giving her a secretary job to avoid a lawsuit. She became the nemesis of sorts and really helped make the show what it was. It's hard to imagine it without her. And what's crazy, she almost didn't audition for the role. She'd been actively dieting at that time, specifically trying to avoid being cast in roles that called for heavy actresses. She didn't want to be typecast. But Mimi's character was confident, she was far from the punching bag, and she was the one dishing out the pain, and that ultimately attracted her to it. Now, beyond the great casting and premise, there was something else that made the Drew Carey Show stand out: the music. Where most sitcoms had one signature element, for example, Friends had the coffee shop, Seinfeld had the stand-up bits, the Drew Carey Show had an identity built almost entirely around music. Season 1 opened with Drew's own cover of Moon Over Parma, a Cleveland area novelty song that set the blue-collar, proudly unglamorous tone immediately. And over the first 3 seasons, the show evolved from a conventional sitcom into something genuinely experimental, using music not as backdrop, but as the main event. In season 2, the premiere introduced a massive tango-inspired office routine set to the Vogue's 5 o'clock world. Dozens of warehouse and office extras, full choreography. It's one of the best sitcom intros in TV history, if you ask me. That same season, an episode called Drew Stock featured live performances from Little Richard and Joe Walsh. Another episode ended with a full street dance-off featuring the Time Warp from the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And then, of course, in season 3, we got Cleveland Rocks by the Presidents of the United States of America, which became the defining theme of the show and really the city. And I'll get into more examples as we go, and also how all of this would eventually cause the show a lot of trouble. But for now, back to season 1. The show finished in the middle of the pack in viewership, 48th in the Nielsen rankings. But it was season 2 where the show became a smash hit. One of the reasons was a new addition to the cast. Craig Ferguson joined in season 2 as Nigel Wick, the eccentric British boss, and immediately clicked. His character mined Ferguson's own real-life struggles with addiction, which made the comedy kind of dark when you think about it, and the Wick-Drew dynamic became one of the show's richest veins. And Craig wasn't the first choice for that role. Stephen Fry and Hugh Laurie were both offered the role first, but they passed. Just think about how this would have changed television. I mean, would we get the Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson, where he basically taught an entire generation of men how to flirt? His interviews are legendary. Go watch them after you watch this entire video twice. Anyway, with Craig in tow, season 2 viewership skyrocketed, with the show finishing 18th in the ratings. Then in season 3, it climbed to 16th. At this point, the show was pulling 14 to 16 million viewers per episode, and it was still innovating. There were live episodes. There were April Fool's What's Wrong With This Episode contests. The writers deliberately planted dozens of mistakes throughout an episode and invited viewers at home to find them, with a $25,000 prize on the line. In a 4th season episode, in Ramada da Vida, there were cameo appearances by Joey Ramone, Dave Mustaine, Slash, Rick Nielsen, and Lemmy. Music continued to be central to the show's identity. And then during the 4th season, Drew started hosting the American version of Whose Line Is It Anyway with co-star Ryan Stiles. At this point, Drew was at his peak popularity and bankability, landing on the Forbes highest paid entertainers list in 1998, earning an estimated $45.5 million that year. But after that 4th season, the Drew Carey Show started slipping in the ratings. In season 5, it dropped to 24th. Far from panic mode for a 5th season show, but it was the start of a trend. Still, the show kept swinging. It did 2 live episodes with improv games borrowed straight from Whose Line Is It Anyway, with Wayne Brady and Jay Leno showing up as guests, and the cast creating scenes on the spot with no safety net. For a network sitcom, that was almost unheard of. The What's Wrong With This Episode specials continued. There was Fellini-esque symbolic imagery, and musical numbers became the norm. The show was getting weirder and more ambitious, but it didn't help the ratings. Season 6 dropped from 24th to 41st, and while the writing wasn't necessarily on the wall, the series was entering its twilight. It's only natural. Even with all the experimenting, interest was fading. One more season probably would have been enough. But ABC didn't see it that way, and went on to make a bizarre deal that would make the show's final years really ugly. Despite ratings that were already beginning to slip, ABC signed a 3-season renewal deal worth a whopping $152 million. This locked the show in through season 9, and the ratings proceeded to crater. Season 7 dropped to 56th place. Normally, this is where, as a network, you'd call it, but ABC was contractually obligated. They had to run it for 2 more seasons. And then they made yet another massive blunder. For season 8, they moved the show to Monday nights at 8, right alongside Monday Night Football. Here's the problem. Monday Night Football aired live across the entire country at the same time for everyone. Drew Carey did not. Depending on the time zone, there was often a conflict. In some cases, Drew Carey was preempted entirely by the games, and it absolutely torpedoed the show. Season 8 plummeted to 119th place in the ratings, losing 44% of its audience. Christa Miller left to join her husband Bill Lawrence on Scrubs, and ABC pulled the show mid-season and burned off the remaining episodes in the summer of 2003. But they were still contractually obligated to do one more season. And this leads to one of the saddest, oddest, and most unceremonious swan songs for a successful show ever. All 26 episodes of season 9 were burned off in the summer of 2004, aired mostly out of production order. Episodes averaged a paltry 3 million viewers, and the series finale on September 8, 2004 was watched by a little over 5 million people. An ugly way to end such a great show. Now, after 233 episodes, you'd think the Drew Carey Show would be everywhere. Syndication, reruns, DVD box sets, and eventually streaming. Well, that's not what happened. After entering off-network syndication in 1999 and running through 2008, Warner Home Video released the complete first season on DVD in April 2007. But that was it. Here's why. Remember everything I said about how central music was to the Drew Carey Show's identity? Well, every single one of those songs had to be relicensed for home video and streaming. And in many cases, the rights holders either wanted enormous fees or simply said no. Drew Carey refused to release the show with the music stripped out or replaced because he wanted the episodes to be identical to what aired. But the music rights holders had him in a legal chokehold of sorts. So for 17 years, that single season DVD release was all fans got. There was no way to watch 211 of the 233 episodes legally. Where most shows are just forgotten, the Drew Carey Show was basically erased from existence. It's a lot like what happened with WKRP in Cincinnati. Must be an Ohio thing. Anyway, like WKRP, the Drew Carey Show was eventually brought back from the dead. In August 2024, all 9 seasons became available to stream on Plex. And finally, in May 2025, 30 years after the show premiered, the complete series, minus 4 episodes, was released on DVD for the first time. When critics finally went back to reassess it, being able to watch all the episodes, they were struck by how far ahead of its time much of the comedy actually was. It was one of the first mainstream sitcoms to center a deliberately unglamorous Midwestern blue-collar workplace. It pioneered the musical episode format in network sitcoms. It ran live improv episodes at a time when nobody else was doing it. And it spawned some great careers in the process. Ryan Stiles kept doing Whose Line indefinitely and founded the Upfront Theater in Bellingham, Washington. Diedrich Bader appeared in Office Space and Napoleon Dynamite, playing 2 iconic characters that still get quoted to this day. He also became a series regular on American Housewife, where in 2019, Carey, Stiles, and Kinney all guest starred together for a Drew Carey Show reunion episode. Christa Miller again moved over to Scrubs while quietly building a second career as a music supervisor. She starred in Cougar Town and supervised the music for Ted Lasso, earning an Emmy nomination, and since 2023 has been starring in Shrinking on Apple TV. Craig Ferguson succeeded Craig Kilborn as host of CBS's The Late Late Show in 2005, won a Peabody Award, and held the job for nearly a decade. Kathy Kinney launched a children's website, mrsp.com, wrote a memoir called Queen of Your Own Life, and continued making Mimi appearances wherever she could, including a Price is Right April Fool's special alongside Carey. And Drew, of course, replaced Bob Barker as host of The Price is Right and has been there ever since, closing in on 20 years. The Drew Carey Show lasted longer than most, did more than most, and the very innovations that made it worth watching are what made it impossible to find for nearly 2 decades. Quite the legacy for, in Drew's own words, a dumpy white guy who lives in Cleveland. If you enjoyed this deep dive, give the video a like and subscribe for more retro TV deep dives. Thanks for watching.